Welcome to the Real Python Podcast. This is episode 216. What hurdles must be cleared when starting an international organization? How do you empower others in a community by sharing responsibilities? This week on the show, we speak with Jay Miller about Black Python devs. Jay shares how the idea of forming a community began through attending conferences. They wanted to welcome more Black developers into the Python community. We discuss the introduction of Black Python devs as part of their PyCon 2024 keynote presentation. Jay explains working with a few key people to build the group's foundations. They talk about the difficulty of letting other people share in the responsibilities and ownership as the membership grew. We also discuss the advantages of partnering with a nonprofit organization. This episode is brought to you by InfluxData. InfluxDB is a purpose-built time series platform for ingesting, storing, and analyzing metrics, events, and logs with sub-second query responses and high interoperability. Start now at influxdata.com. All right, let's get started. The Real Python Podcast is a weekly conversation about using Python in the real world. My name is Christopher Bailey, your host. Each week, we feature interviews with experts in the community and discussions about the topics, articles, and courses found at realpython.com. After the podcast, join us and learn real-world Python skills with a community of experts at realpython.com. Hey, Jay.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. It's been quite a while. We've been trying to get you on the show, so I'm very excited to have you here.
Yeah, this is like the dream. Like I've been following the work that you've been doing, and been like, how do I do this? I want to be on the show.
That's nice. It was fun hanging out briefly at PyCon the last couple times in Salt Lake City. I'm sorry I didn't make it this year. I heard I was missed. So
absolutely, I was like running around the expo hall, being like, where's the Real Python booth? I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah. Well, I really want to try to get out there next year. It sounds like an amazing venue and an amazing city. I definitely want to check it out. So
yeah, there. I think there's going to be a cookout or something. If Black Python devs can get the paperwork inked, then we're bringing a whole new vibe to PyCons.
That sounds like another level. Yeah. So I want to briefly say congratulations on your keynote. That turned out really great. Now that it's up on YouTube, everybody can check it out.
Yeah, thank you. I have done. This is the second keynote that I've done, or I guess the second like official keynote that I've done. And this one was, I don't know, it felt different. I think that anytime that you give between a meetup talk and a conference talk or a lightning talk to like a regular talk and then to go into a keynote, someone asked me, they were like, how much did you prepare? And then how much of that preparation went out the window as soon as you got on stage? And I was like, more than usual and more than usual is the answer.
Well, I feel like it came together well. I definitely love the audio visual elements. That I always find that an intriguing thing to add to a presentation, stuff that you can kind of include in there.
Yeah, anytime you can incorporate storytelling, I think shout out to Samana whose keynote was just fantastic.
Yeah.
I've not enjoyed like sitting down and watching a presentation as much. And again, for me it was easy. It was like stick to this theme of like building the Wakanda of like the Python community, and it's like that writes itself at that point. You're just like throw up Black Panther stuff, tie that into real life stuff, but to just go on the roller coaster. And I think all the keynotes were absolutely, even like Simon's was great.
Yeah.
I was super interested, and like I do AI stuff at work sometimes. I was like taking notes and taking figures like, hey, you should check this out. Hey, we need to bring in Simon to talk to us about stuff. Like, I think this year's selection was top notch. And of course, there's a little bit of bias in there, but it was good.
Sure. That's okay. Yeah. I've had Sumina on the show. I'd like to have her come back and talk again. And Simon, somebody I've been trying to figure out, like, okay, what is the topic I get him to come on and like, kind of a direction for it. Cause it's like such a wide thing that he's sort of surveying. He's sort of surveying all the AI stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I would just talk to him maybe about what the end goal is. I mean, I've had that conversation with him, so like I know some of the secrets, but
Okay.
I think that it would be interesting in that we live in a world, so people can do the in a world thing there.
In a world.
Exactly. But yeah, like we're in a time and a place now where everyone is looking at AI for a lot of, I don't want to say personal reasons, but like whether it's to make more money in their current job, to avoid being replaced by AI in their job,
Yeah.
or to, startups and get rich quick schemes. But like some of the conversations I've had with Simon, it just ties into the authenticity of a human being that he is, and just really just pursuit of knowledge, but knowledge for greater and common good.
Yeah. And the way he shares it, which is amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think Simon coming on to talk about more the why he's doing what he's doing, to me, would be a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, maybe that'd be good. Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned kind of briefly there that you're in a new position, at least since I've talked to you in person. And so, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're up to lately?
Yeah, so I'm a staff developer advocate over at a European company called Aiven.
Okay.
I say that as most of the folks on the US side will say, "Who is Aiven?" And I will go, "Well, Aiven isn't a person; it's a it's a company.
Yeah.
It's AIVEN, and no, we are not an AI company. Well, kind of, but we are a. Our goal is to be kind of your trusted data and AI platform, and a lot of that is focusing very heavily on the data side. A lot of data platform as a service, options are very much, here's a single database. You can sign up for it. We make it easier. We make it cheaper. We make it insert something here.
Right.
The thing that Aiven really does differently is it instead focuses on the entire like implementation stack of data. So whether you're dealing with like relational databases with Postgres or MySQL,
Yeah.
you're dealing with like specific use cases like columnar databases like ClickHouse, or search architecture with OpenSearch, or even caching with, at this point now, Redis, Dragonfly, and Valky. Aiven supports all of those.
Okay.
And when I say support, it's not just as a consumer grade or business grade product. We support those ecosystems as well. A lot of our employees, a lot of our DBAs, a lot of our engineers are open source maintainers. In fact,
okay. They're coming out of those communities.
Yeah. So we helped bring Valky as a service, and Valky is a fork of Redis, since Redis changed their license a few months ago.
Yes.
And I'm happy to say that, like, hey, I'm a contributor to that because I contributed to the Valky Pi project.
Cool.
And working to do more with that. So it's kind of the spirit of have your data there, but know that your data is in good hands, all the way from, top-notch DBAs, top-notch SREs, all the way to the people who are actively contributing back to those projects and making sure that we're implementing things with care and concern. So that's kind of what we do. And I am your resident DA, which means I'm out there cranking out content, going to some of these events when they let me. I actually just got back from a meetup in Toronto, which was really fun. But also, our stack is very heavily Python influenced, and I'm trying to kind of be that glue between Aiven, the company, using all this Python, and the Python community, and showing how, like, hey, maybe there's something there. Let's make it happen.
That's cool. And you said that they're more known in maybe European context and that they're kind of growing.
Yeah, they're a Finnish company, so they've been around for several years in the EU, and a lot of that means that I have like 2 different phones that I got to carry, 2 different laptops. GDPR is very, very real and serious, so they are very focused on like data privacy even internally. But yeah, we're just now starting to build and develop more, and I would say we've got some healthy growth happening in the US, and our plan is to kind of move into a more global position for what we do.
Would you consider that job to be developer relations, or is it kind of a cross of things then?
Oh, it's definitely Dev Rel. I mean, the team that I'm on is like developer relations, acquisition, and growth. So like, it's we fall we're the type of Dev Rel that falls under marketing, which is fine because before I was a developer advocate, I was a marketer, so it kind of works out. I speak a little bit more of that language than I do maybe the software engineering or product side. So
yeah,
It's really cool to see. And I think we're actually one of the last really good examples of developer relation disciplines where we have not just developer advocates, but we have developer educators and tech
Yeah. Okay.
writers, and we have folks who are working on and these different spaces that all usually get bundled under, oh, you're in Dev Rel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been really cool to play an advocacy role, but play it alongside of other professionals who are very specific about what they do, and really you can lean on their expertise to make your content better, to make your presentations better, to make it fit, the academia model a little bit better, or make it better for presenting to in a workshop format. Whereas I'm just used to going on like, what's up, it's your boy, like and subscribe, like, doing that whole thing.
Right. So in this case, you can get people to kind of check out some of the stuff that you're doing and get like suggestions and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And the remixes of it are just fantastic.
Oh,
Like
good. Yeah.
I've made like an open search, like LangChain with Python course. And when I did it, they were like, oh, I want to present it, but I want to present it from this angle. And I was like, oh, I didn't even
There
think
you go.
about that. And then,
Yeah.
then like someone else was like, oh, I want to write this for it, but I want to do it in Java. And I was like, okay, well, like what are the differences? And so like we start diving in. And honestly, it's like, I think there's a saying like iron sharpens iron. So like we're all kind of able to build up all of our skills by working together, but kind of coming at it from different angles.
That's really neat. You have this kind of running joke of like nobody knows what Dev Rel is.
Yeah.
And that I think epitomized it there. What you're saying, that it just can be so many different things. It can be documentation, it can be creating presentations and so forth. And it sounds like this is, I mean, when we first met, in person at PyCon, I guess it'd be 2022.
Yeah.
You had just got that gig at Microsoft, which is a whole story in and of itself. Was that your first Dev Rel job, or was that something else before that?
That was my second.
Okay.
Yeah. So my first Dev Rel role was at Elastic, so the makers of Elasticsearch.
Okay.
And honestly, like, for me being a marketer, I played with a lot of data. I was using Python kind of as the glue to like, hey, I made this cool thing using Python and stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think that was my first conference talk, was how to build a small business, a small business around podcasting and marketing using Python and stuff that we won't talk about in this talk.
Sure.
So like having come from Elastic, which, Elasticsearch is very Java based. It wasn't, in the Python space, but yet so many really awesome Python developers came out of that cohort of Elastic, like Seth Larson, who's over, the PyPI developer in residence.
Yeah.
We worked together at Elastic. Some Mike Piernat, and I don't remember if Dave was there or not, but some of the organizers for PyOhio, they were all at Elastic. So like there was this really cool like movement happening for like Python developers at Elastic. And I think now most of us have
sort of under the radar there.
Yeah, we like all went and did different things. And Microsoft reached out to me and said, hey, how would you like to write more Python in your day to day? And I was like, that sounds great.
There you go. Yeah.
So we set that up, and to be honest, I missed doing the data thing. Like data is such a cool thing. And I always tell people I'm such a big advocate for, you have so much free data around you happening all the time and you don't even notice it.
Yeah. You may not even be collecting any of it.
Yeah. Well, take whatever town you live in, go to Google. Don't try to chat GPT this one. Like go directly to Google and just put in like the name of your town and open data.
Yeah.
And a lot of states, like depending on the population, you'll have data requirements that the city has to collect. And all of it's usually free. It's open source. You can kind of do with it, or it's Creative Commons, zero, like whatever you want to do with it, you have the ability to.
That's cool.
And I always tried to make my demos like, how do I do something that, shows off a company product or feature, but do it using localized data that inspires someone to go out and play with their own data sets that they have for their city.
Yeah, we did. I joined a local meetup here, Pie Springs, and they did a demonstration of some of that open data stuff, which I thought was really, really cool. Yeah, I think the first reaction most people have is like, I can get that. I can get my paws on that. It's like, yeah, it may not be in your favorite form, but
A lot of CSV.
yeah, you might be cleaning a little bit, or whatever. But yeah, and it may not be the fastest connection, but yeah, which is very cool. So in this, I know from hanging out with you for a little bit at PyCon, especially 2023, that you have lots of other kind of creative pursuits that you like to do, video and photography and music and stuff like that. Does that help in your role, do you think?
I think so.
In being a Dev Rel person?
I definitely think so. I have been told I do too much. I've been told by a lot of people I do too much. So maybe that's an indicator that I indeed do a lot.
Can you define that? Do you mean like you do too many things, or that you are able to do too many things and people ask you to do them for them?
I think I volunteer too much information about my skill set from time to time. So they're like, oh, well, Jay could do this.
Been there. Yep. Been there.
You make a video and you make it really, really quick. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, how did you edit this? And you're like, oh yeah, I have like Final Cut and like 3 other video editing softwares. And they're like, hey, you're going to edit all of the video for our team now. And it's like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah. I've been there. The school I worked for, I was showing some videos I'd made for friends. And actually I had just really done the music. But the assumption was that I was involved in the project, and obviously I then have the skills to make the entire video.
I do think that there's like some knowledge that goes with that too. Like I knew about epidemic sound, and people are like, epidemic sound, what's that? It's like, oh, it's a way that you can like license music for your videos. And like, not just that, if you don't want that, there's like three other services that you can pick from.
So you're an expert.
I mean, that's
what's so funny about it.
Yeah. But it's really cool that you're able to kind of go, oh, this thing that I would kind of do in my spare time, or this thing that I would do, just as I don't know, it felt cool at the moment. Like recording the interviews that we did last year at PyCon US 2023.
Yeah.
Like no one asked me to do that. I just kind of I had all my video stuff with me because we were doing stuff at the Microsoft booth.
Right.
And I was just like, what if I just started interviewing people from different perspectives of like PyCon US? And then I was like, we did it, and then we recorded some of the folks from Microsoft. So then I was like, well, now I've justified it for work. Now let me go like run off and do the other fun stuff. And then we did the same thing at DjangoCon. And then this year DjangoCon was like, hey, are you doing that thing? And I was like, let's talk about finding a producer and like 3 other people that can do this that are not named Jay Miller.
Yeah. You were definitely being 3 or 4 people at the time.
Yeah, but when you do that, like even if it's I tell people in Black Python devs all the time this, like it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Like it barely has to be good. Like if you do it and you just show that there's like an interest and there's something there, you'll develop that muscle over time. It's almost like podcasting. I mean, I can see you can see me. We're both talking with, the professional headphones on, plugged into an audio interface and,
totally.
All that stuff. But at the end of the day, most people start with like the phones, the headphones that they got from their phone.
Right.
Or they start with like the $50 Blue Snowball or the $90 like Blue Yeti.
Yeah.
And there's only so much processing that you can do to like change that. But honestly, like my first podcast ran for 7 years, and at one point it was doing numbers or whatever, and we were looking at getting sponsors, and it was bringing in a little bit of money.
Yeah.
But once I got to a podcast network, a lot of it was it was a springboard off of all of that experimentation, off of all of the like, hey, I'm going to start a podcast where me and 3 other developers talk about anime that, we only get through one anime and it does 7 episodes and flops. But at the same time, like I learned how to record a podcast with 3 people on it.
Yeah.
And I learned like the process of editing. I learned about the pacing of doing that. I learned how to
how much planning is required.
Exactly. So sometimes it's not a matter of like, did I build the $1 million startup with my Hello World app? No. But like, what did I pull from that I can go in and apply maybe at, a job, and to go, oh yeah, I learned how to do this when I was, messing around with some little project.
I don't know if you want to mention that first podcast. Was that a tech type of thing, or what was that?
The first podcast that I did was called Productivity in Tech.
Okay.
And I think it's still around.
So you've always kind of had that bent a little bit, huh?
Oh yeah, I was a big fan of productivity, and I've talked about this in a couple of other places. Like,
yeah,
the reality was I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I got out of the Marine Corps and I started working, and I don't know, like, I think a thing that people kind of forget is that most military personnel join the military when they're like 18 years old. Like, I joined when I was 19, so I spent a year on my own, and then I joined the Marine Corps. But you don't really have a good sense of how to work like a corporate job, or how to work like you show up with the little dress code type thing and you like do the work.
right.
And you've been told for the last, all of your adulthood exactly when to wake up, where to eat, what to do after you're done doing what you got to do.
Super structured, right? You just, yeah.
Exactly. So for me, like, learning about, tips like the Eisenhower priority matrix and things like that, were like, I've got to figure this out or I'm going to lose my job, because I am not at the time, maybe even still now, like, not the strongest in terms of like just being a employee doing employee things.
So you're approaching as not as an expert, as like kind of like how I started my podcast here. Like,
Yeah,
I want to learn this thing, and so I'm going to bring on people and ask them lots of questions.
exactly.
Yeah, cool.
In fact, like, my second interview was with someone who now runs like a productivity YouTube channel that has almost like 1 million subscribers. And
Wow,
like,
yeah.
I remember starting, like, just creating the channel and being like, can I be on your podcast? I was like, sure, why not? Let's do it. So seeing how over time, I just kind of learned that like Dev Rel, none of us know what we're doing.
Right.
We're kind of making it up as we go along. We're figuring it out. Mike Tyson's famous for saying, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. But like, I feel like productivity kind of is like that, where like, you've got a plan, you're doing the plan, then you get punched in the face by a deadline or something, and then you're like, I don't know what to do next. And to me, like, instead of being like Mike Tyson and losing your plan, you got to be like Muhammad Ali. You just got to dance. You got to like dance around it. You got to be like nimble, quick on your feet, ready to adapt, ready to adjust your style. And honestly, the show that I do now called Conduit was really that. It was taking all of the lessons that I learned over the several years of interviewing people and kind of going, you know what, let's have fun with this.
Yeah, that show is much more of a hang, which is cool. I mean, it's like you get to hang with the two of you, and you occasionally have other guests, but it's mostly like kind of hang, and then you really invite the community to do that with you.
Yeah,
which is really interesting.
Through our podcast, we've seen like a book be written. We've seen a couple of like weddings happen. People have changed their careers. I think we had someone who was like a software engineer that like stopped being a software engineer and is now like a physical trainer. And a lot of that is just like not even having a full on plan, but just being like, all right, for the next 2 weeks, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And just kind of letting that be the ship that steers you and taking it 2 weeks at a time in between. We call them connections. So, you have a connection that takes you from, the last 2 weeks to the next 2 weeks of, hey, this is what I was supposed to do. This is whether or not I did it. And then here's what I'm going to try to do in the next 2 weeks. And really just focusing in on that. And, to be honest, like we do it ourselves, and it's okay to say like, yeah, I totally didn't do it. I totally waffled on it. Or, I was going to do it, but then like something more important happened.
Right. 75 other things came up.
Exactly. So being able to give yourself a little bit of grace, give yourself a little permission to be, it's okay that you didn't do the thing, but also just kind of owning it and just being like, hey, that's the next 2 weeks are for. We're going to knock it out of the park this time.
A huge amount of productivity is writing it down, the sort of accountability of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I've done something because like the episode was the next day and I was like, crap, I don't want to, I got to do this now.
I've been that way since, I guess, high school. I don't know.
Yeah.
Get everything done. Yeah. Developers love InfluxDB because it excels in real-time performance for time series data, offering sub-second query responses and scalable architecture. It separates storage and compute using cost-effective Apache Parquet files to slash storage costs significantly. Its open architecture allows direct access to data for analytics, business intelligence, and machine learning, eliminating complex ETL needs. Learn more at InfluxData.com. That's INFLUXDATA.com. I'm super excited to talk to you, continuing what you were discussing in your talk at PyCon about Black Python devs. And maybe we can start with, I don't know if you're tired of talking about the origin story here, but maybe you could talk about what it is and how you kind of started to develop this group.
Sure. Well, no, I don't mind giving the origin story. As they say in Spider-Man, let's do this one more time.
Sure.
So my Uncle Ben now.
Oh, no.
No. So my first PyCon US was 2022. I'd wanted to go to some before, and then 2020 happened.
Yeah.
So that kind of threw a wrench in the plans. But so I was super excited, and there's just this reality that, like, as a Black male going to a Python conference, there might be one other Black person that you see, and kind of the goal is find that person. Like, hey, I want to see someone that looks like me. And my keynote breaks down the identity of, like, what is Blackness, and, like, how do people, especially in America, like, see Blackness as a part of their overall identity as a human being. So, like, it's really cool to see folks like Kojo Idrissa and Don Wages at some of these events. But I started noticing that, like, that was all I saw was, like, Kojo and Don and myself. But then I would, like, see these images of, like, conferences where they're like, oh, they have this super diverse, like, group of folks, and they're inviting people to join. So it felt like there was kind of a little bit of a disconnect. So yeah, PyCon US 2022, like, I counted, like, how many Black folks I saw at this event, and there were 12. And I was like, that's out of 2,000, that's a low number. We can work on that. And I just started asking, everyone that I bumped into, hey, are you giving a talk? What brings you to Salt Lake City? Are you from here? Like, what are some of the reasons that brought you here? And a lot of people were like, I'm either looking for a job, and I was told that this was like an event, and I got like a opportunity grant, or I'm working. I work at one of the vendors, and they brought me here. But basically, they were like, I'm doing something here. Like, I'm not here because the Python community is one of the friendliest communities on the planet. It's like, I'm here because there's a transaction happening.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, that's not fun. Like, I mean, yeah, granted, I'm here also because, I was meeting my team at Microsoft, but my plan was to be there regardless. That was the thing. I'd actually, Elastic at the time when I was transitioning out, I had convinced Elastic to sponsor PyCon US. So it was, my goal was I was going to be there.
Right.
Come hell or high water, I was going to be there. So then I was like, oh, there's these other things that you should give a talk. Usually, sometimes if you give a talk, it increases your odds of getting opportunity grants, and you don't have to pay as much. Or, giving a talk is very, very addictive. It's like getting tattoos. You do one, and then after that, you want to do another one, and then another one, and then another one. And I was really intrigued that people were just like, why would I ever get on stage and give a talk? And I was like, oh, I got my job by doing that. People looked at, like, the talks that I was giving and said, hey, do you want to come work for us?
Yeah. It's a huge exposure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt like there were like a couple of disconnects happening where, like, the community was like, I don't know if they want me there, but I'm here working, or I'm here for reasons. And meanwhile, the community is like, how do we increase the participation of, like, Black folks in the US, at least, to going to these events? So I tried to work really hard the next year to, like, let's see if we can get more people here. Let's talk about it. Let's be open about it. I'm going to help a couple of folks with their talks. I'll do what I can. I heard about some other communities, like, shout out to the community in Brazil that was like, they were flying together, and everybody was like, they're doing, like, these, like, opportunity grant, like, meetups where they were all, like, filling out the forms together and doing stuff.
Yeah.
And we tripled that number. So we had, over 30 people at this event of about 2,500 folks. And, again, it was better, which is great. But, we thought we could do even more. But what more importantly I saw was when the community got behind it and said, let's all work together to make this a reality, we started to see an impact, and we started to see a change. So we did an open space. It was amazing. We had a bunch of great conversations. We had a good time. And I immediately just made a Discord after that, and it's called a Black Python Devs. And, it was like 10 people for the longest, but then we're slowly growing, and then I get to DjangoCon US and we've got like 50 or 60 people.
Yeah, that seems like that was an interesting like additional turning point. But I think it's partly where that was located in the proximity to the historic colleges and stuff, right?
Well, not even. Like, the
Oh,
interesting
really?
part
Okay.
was this was like the first time that communities from Africa had like
Oh, so DjangoCon.
heard about what we were doing. Yeah, because I mean, DjangoCon's always, shout out to the folks at Defna. Like, I feel like they've always tried to be on the cutting edge of like doing things, even if it doesn't fully make sense. So, I mean, we had 5 or 6 countries being represented, and I have a photo of us where we're like all sitting at a table, just kind of talking about our individual communities and what we could learn from each other. And people were like, "Hey, so this community, like, could it do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course it could." And like, "Oh, could it do this?" "Yeah, of course it could." And then Kojo was like, I think you're like, I hope you're not promising too much. And I was like, well, I mean, no one else is giving it a fair attempt, so
Right.
let's promise. And I would rather promise, come back and be like, I tried my best and it didn't work. And the funny thing happened, we gained like 40 members over the weekend, and there were definitely not 40 Black people at the event. So it was like,
Okay.
people were like messaging back to their communities like, hey, there's this thing happening. And then they talk about it at DjangoCon Africa, and then like we start growing, and then we hit like 500 people.
Wow.
Right before PyCon US. And I mean, now we're at 600 and something, and we're really able to see what happens when everybody in the community is wanting the same thing. They want to feel like they belong in the community. And I kind of boiled it down to like the 3 things that everyone really wants. And they want safety. They want to make sure that, they're protected, and
Yeah.
that, they're not going to be harassed or mistreated. They want accessibility. I don't want to have to travel across the world to go to a meetup. Like, that's not really helpful.
Right.
And there's only one PyCon US a year, so maybe there should be a local conference closer to me. And they want it to be equitable. You can't participate in a meetup, you can't do all these things when at the end of the day you're like, how am I buying my groceries?
Right.
Thinking about all 3 of those things has really been a thing that we do, and we approach all the things that we do kind of from that angle of like, how do we make it accessible? How do we make it approachable? How do we make it, equitable? And that's kind of given us some different sponsorship ideas, which is, I love, like, we talked about it before. I love being creative. I love thinking about things a little bit differently,
Right.
but really getting involved in the community that, maybe we're sponsoring, and going like, what is it that y'all really need? Like, money is always going to be a need, and that'll be there. But like, how could we apply this money differently? I mean, and we saw that with like PyCon Nigeria. We bought 75 student tickets. We were showing people how they could donate like $100 to, the opportunity grant and things like that. We've got some really cool sponsorships coming up that, we haven't fully ironed out the details on, so I don't want to share them. But like, I can tell you there are at least 3 or 4 other events this year that we're going to be at, that we're really trying to get involved in it, and differently than just the traditional like,
Yeah.
here's a check, where's my booth, handing out stickers.
I think one of the ones that you mentioned, and I forget the country that she was collecting the books from, but the idea of like, bringing in books, overseas is like shipping them there, and the tariffs and all the kind of craziness of like
Yeah.
trying to do something like that is really, really difficult. But like them being at the conference and then the person taking them home in an extra suitcase, is kind of amazing. So I wonder if you could approach, there's so many publishers, if that would be something they would be interested in as like a side thing. So
I think it's always a challenge, when you're, and for that project, Abigail Dogby
okay.
has a nonprofit that's, I think it's like books for Africa. I think it's the name of it. But our plan there was just to support what she was doing already, and
Yeah.
I think that was one of the big things that I don't know if I emphasized it enough in my presentation, was that most of the people who are in leadership positions here have been in the community, and they've been trying. It's just, again, it's like a collective effort. When you have a community that says, we're really going to focus in on like these projects that people are working on, or we're really going to try to bring attention, or good example, or later on this week as we're recording, there's going to be a workshop in Zimbabwe, in Harare. And this is for people who have never used Python before. So this is like we call it like the first time exposure.
Yeah.
And we want that to be as smooth as possible, but we also have to understand, like, not everybody wants to make a blog.
Right.
And, in Harare, there are going to be different concerns. There are going to be different, stories. We look at a lot of our analogies, we look at a lot of our metaphors, and like we're coming to it from one lens.
Yeah. I did this whole episode about this with Al Swigert. He really wanted to get this woman on who wrote this book about the one laptop per child program and how the perceptions that the white tech entrepreneur people that are setting up this sort of stuff assume that everybody wants to learn the way that they learn, that they're going to be a precocious young white child who's just eager to read books and dive into stuff and build stuff. And it's like, you aren't looking at any of these other aspects, and then also just the raw infrastructure behind, like, okay, you give them this laptop, but do they have a way to maintain it? And
reliable power,
internet, blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of crazy. All these different things that you got to think about. Too many assumptions of it's going to be like this. So.
Yeah, and that's why we let them take the lead on it. Our PyCon Nigeria sponsorship just went through last week.
Cool.
And I mean, we had 4 Nigerians working the booth, telling their story about how, Black Python Devs is helping them. And, of course, we have like the template deck of like, here's some talking points that are great, but, we couldn't emphasize it enough. Like, make it your story. And they were like,
yeah,
can we design our own shirts? It's like, yeah, go wild. Like, don't spend too much money, but like, let me know how much it was. We want it to feel like, hey, community in Nigeria, it's not some US nonprofit telling you what to do or how to do it. It's really like, we want to invest in the things that you're doing, the things that you care about. All of our vendors and stuff that we use were based out of Lagos. We fully believe that, like, we want to invest in your community, because you shouldn't have to move to the Bay Area just to get a Python job.
Yeah.
You should be able to stay in Harare, stay in Accra, Ghana, or stay in Lagos, Nigeria, or in my case, I'm living in Atlanta, Georgia now. We got plenty of tech companies, but, I grew up in Knoxville. So, stay in Knoxville, Tennessee,
right.
And be able to have opportunities where you are.
Yeah. You mentioned there kind of briefly this nonprofit thing. That's a recent wrinkle, right?
Yeah. So the hard thing about sponsoring people is you need money. And unfortunately, the money was mostly just coming out of my bank account for the longest.
Yeah,
and
I bet.
I had so many people telling me, like, hey, don't do that. Like, there are plenty of companies here that can support, that can help out. There are plenty of individuals who can sponsor and help. And the first question with that was finding a fiscal sponsor, because I don't know if people know, but running a nonprofit is not like running a meetup. It's very different. It's a lot more to think about. Most of my meetings are like budget review, or like,
there's so much legality involved. It's just kind of crazy. Yeah. I talked to the guy from No Starch Press, and he had started one. He was like amazed at, like, I thought I could just give this money away, and it's it was not that.
No.
There's so much involved. Yeah.
So the shortcut is to find a fiscal host, which is someone who operates as a nonprofit already, that basically will allow you to operate under their name. And the Gnome Foundation, Linux community, reached out to us when we were like, hey, we're looking for a fiscal host, and they said, we see what you're doing, we love what you're doing, we want to support you doing it.
Wow.
The conversation was very much like, we're not asking you to show up at board meetings. We're not asking you to, make sure that every demo that you give is using GNOME in the background, or, anything like that.
Our logo must be included. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was purely just like, we want to support what you're doing any way that we can. So yeah, you go through those negotiations. Of course, it costs them money to support you. So then you have to set up they got to take a percentage of that, which makes sense. And, that's funny enough. People are so disturbed by that. And I was like, every Python community I know that is under some fiscal host has that exact same deal.
Yeah.
And it honestly, it makes things so much easier.
Yeah. You don't want to hire a lawyer. You don't want to
Yeah,
look at
exactly.
those people. Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, at PyCon US, we were able to raise $21,000 in
Wow.
4 days. And a lot of that was because we had the infrastructure in place to make it relatively easy. I mean, granted, we crashed that infrastructure because people were so eager. People were like, it's not
That's nice.
working. And I was like, try it again. And like, oh, it worked this time.
So the people were trying to hit that QR code.
Exactly. So like, I mean, those are good problems to have, right?
Yeah.
We're too popular. But yeah, like just having this backer, in the Gnome Foundation behind us, allowing us to at least know that we can operate, we can collect money, we can reach out and find grants, and that ecosystem is full of opportunities of ways to make sure that we're doing as much as we can outside of our own financial limitations, which is super fantastic.
That's cool. One of the things I was thinking about before we started to talk was like, what would be some of the big hurdles that you would have? And we've mentioned a few of them, but I'm wondering if there are some that we haven't hit yet. That what were
So
some of the biggest
many.
hurdles there of starting this?
The biggest one is just understanding. I think we talked about kind of like understanding the like geopolitical
Yeah,
landscape of doing things. Like
sure.
our bank doesn't send money to Nigeria.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that
yeah.
is,
Africa is a interesting set of contrasts, whatever you want to
yeah,
call it.
yeah. I mean,
Has so many countries and so many different relationships with the governmental agencies and whatever. Oh my gosh.
and it can change with one election.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we're looking at the situation happening in Kenya with the Reject Finance Bill campaign that was going through. We were looking at some of the things now in Niger. There's a couple of countries around that area that are kind of forming this alliance thing, and anytime we do that, like we're immediately like, let me go to the sanctions list and just verify whether or not we can actually give money to this organization or this program, and really just figuring out sometimes the logistic nature of it. Of, hey, luckily, PyCon Nigeria, some of the organizers are actually based out of Canada, and a lot of their funds were collected in Canada, so we were able to.
Okay.
We can't send to Nigeria, but we can send to Canada. That works.
Right.
And figuring out like, okay, what are we within the boundaries of doing? What are we capable of doing? Like, make sure we're not breaking any laws. Make sure we're not doing anything that's going to cause any trouble. But I mean, the other one is just you've got to be very volunteer heavy. I think one of the things that I probably should have done better at the beginning is say no to more things.
Okay.
So many people were so excited and so eager.
Just as an individual or
As a decision maker,
okay.
I think a lot of it is we want to move at the pace of all of the other things.
Okay.
And it becomes incredibly hard to do that when you're sponsoring 3 or 4 events at the same time. You want to start an open source initiative. I'm giving out teasers for things that are coming up. You're
Yeah,
launching a book club. You're debating throwing your own conference. You're doing all of these different things.
These
And
are possibilities.
yes,
Yes.
and you have like 5 people that are like really eager
Hmm.
to do all of those things, and then everybody gets burned out and it doesn't work.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we've kind of talked about it, and now the way that we approach things is the first step is like, who's responsible for this?
Yeah.
And there is a very real like, if you're responsible for too many things, we just have to go,
Raise your hand.
no, you can't, you got to put your hand down. You're not allowed
Okay.
to volunteer for this.
Right.
Or you have to give up some of those other things that you're doing and put someone else in charge. And
That's cool. They have people looking out for each other in that way.
yeah, and as we've done that, it's been good. I mean, it really has been beneficial because one, it opens doors. I think a lot of folks, just in our community, again, you see the same faces volunteering, running for boards, taking initiatives on. I think for a while we've just become so used to that. We're so used to always having to be the person that volunteers, because if we don't, who else will speak for the people in our communities? So now that we are all in the same community, there is like this, those same people still raising their hands, and we're like, why don't we give someone else an opportunity to step up and lead this thing?
And maybe wouldn't you even like that?
Yeah.
If there wasn't so much for you to do. I guess it depends on the person's personality, but yeah.
You'd be surprised how hard it was to be like, I'm not going to get involved in this. Because you're just so used to doing it. And,
right.
if something goes wrong, you're like, see, I should have just done the whole thing. It's like, no, like,
let them find their footing. Yeah.
Yeah, we've given so many people the opportunity to step into a leadership position and just be like, you know what? You don't believe that you're capable of handling all of our sponsorship coordination for the entire continent of Africa, but I think you can do it. And then those people just be like, wow, like, can I put that on my resume? And it's like, you sure can. Like,
Wow,
go right ahead. Like, conference coordinator for the entire continent. Like, that sounds amazing.
Yeah,
and
really
it's all because I was like, I can't do this. It's not going to be me. Like, I don't have the
you don't have the
knowledge.
connections and knowledge and
or the time.
Yeah. This week, I want to shine a spotlight on another Real Python video course. So many websites make their data accessible to third-party applications through an application programming interface, or API. One of the most popular ways to build APIs is the REST architecture style. Python provides some really great tools, not only to get data from REST APIs, but to build your own Python REST APIs. And this course is titled Interacting with REST APIs and Python. It's based on a real Python tutorial by Jason van Schooneveld, and your video course instructor is Darren Jones. And he'll take you through what REST architecture is, how REST APIs provide access to web data, how to consume data from REST APIs using the requests library, what are the first steps of building a REST API, and he takes you through working with specific Python tools and the fundamentals of building REST APIs in Flask, Django REST Framework, and FastAPI. Real Python video courses are broken into easily consumable sections, and where needed, include code examples for the techniques shown. All lessons have a transcript, including closed captions. Check out the video course. You can find a link in the show notes, or you can find it using the enhanced search tool on realpython.com. Maybe this is related to that, but what's something that you wish you knew before you started on this whole journey?
How to write grants. That's still a thing. That's still a thing that I wish I...
Have you found good resources on any of that?
No. And if anyone had, this is me reaching out to the Python community.
Call out.
If you are a grant writer, or if you want to, point us to some amazing grant writers, or even show us how to find and source these grant opportunities. This is a big barrier for us of like, hey, we know that the opportunity and the funding is out there, but is there like a website I can go to? Is there like a course I can take?
Yeah.
Also, if you have a time machine and you can like pause time and give me the ability to do all that stuff, that would be great.
Yeah, because you're still, your feet are still moving.
Yeah. I think the other thing I kind of wish I knew was, I wish I was a better documentarian. Like we have a documentation team now. That was one of those things that we were like, we're really bad at like writing down the stuff that we're doing. So let's just get people who want to be technical writers.
Is that for your own history, for teaching other members of the team, for sharing your progress, or is it all those things?
All of those things, including just like, hey, we have this Streamlit application that we want so that people can have like a nice little presentation up at a booth. That way, we're not recreating the wheel, but how do you document that? How do you write the how-to on how to set that up? How do you configure your environment?
Okay.
So there is some like technical documentation writing, but there is also like policy writing, and a lot of it is like, hey Jay, what do you think about this? I was like, well, I think that this and this and this. Oh, Jay's the boss. Okay, let's document that so that when it backfires, we can all look at Jay and be like, this is what you said.
Oh my gosh.
But it's been great, and like as we do that, I feel like we're still kind of chasing ourselves on that of like, hey, we said that we were going to do this, and this. Is this written down anywhere? No? Okay, let's get it written down. That way, someone can hold our feet to the fire when we try to do something other than that.
Do you have an idea of how you would gather all that? Like, where would you post it all or whatever have you?
So we're being extremely I say low tech. We're just using GitHub.
Okay.
Like it's easy, you know.
Lots of text files can go inside GitHub.
Yeah, we wanted our entire mission to be open source, kind of by default. So as long as we're not sharing personal information, everything is usually available. You just have to ask for it or go onto the GitHub repo and find it. And
interesting. Wonder if you could see other organizations that have done something similar. You can look at what they've done.
We cribbed that idea from kind of what PyLadies was doing, what Django Girls has been doing. Women Who Code was another one.
Yeah.
This was, I mean, these were all just like seeing how they did it and going like, is this going to work for us? And this was, you know, in the keynote, I mentioned kind of like the Southeast Asian community, which is a community that, you know, for very geographical and somewhat obvious reasons, we don't have a lot of membership from.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because what we learned was that some of the issues that we had were some of the issues that they had. And what we needed to do was work with them and say, hey, what are y'all doing and how are y'all doing it? And is it documented somewhere so that we can look at that and go, this will work for us or this won't work for us.
Yeah.
But we also want to reciprocate that and say, here's what we're doing and we have it written down. You can look at it and take the things that work for you and, you know, ignore the things that don't.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say is your latest win? Like, what's the thing you're like proud of right at the moment? You're like, yes.
Oh, man. I think just seeing the confidence of the community growing, and to see it kind of grow outside of, you know, we had this, my concern was that we were going to kind of be an echo chamber of that, like we were going to just, you have these leaders who are all trying to bring diversity to the Python community, that they get together and then now they're all just yelling at each other about how we can bring diversity to the Python community. One of the things that I call it a small win as it is, but like I was in New York last week for an AWS event, and in that event, I was able to meet a group of folks who live in New York but are Nigerian, and have a conversation and then be like, yeah, but like, what do you do? Like, how are you helping people, not just in America? And I was like, well, you're Nigerian. And they're like, how do you know I'm Nigerian? I was like, well, you told me your name. And they're like, how did you know my name was Nigerian? I was like, because I work with a lot of Nigerians. but also like,
that's cool.
We're sponsoring this event in Lagos right now, and like you could just see their
eyes just like, or the total like emoji of head exploding.
It was this moment of like,
that's cool.
Wow, this is a community that cares not just about like the Bay Area or the financial district. They care about us at home, because I mean, all of them got visas to work in the US and they're doing that, and
and they're keeping their profile where it is.
But, well, I mean, it limits what you're capable to do. Like at any point, your visa renewal can be revoked, and it's like you got to leave the country not in like 6 months, but like in 24 hours. And that's a struggle. So to be able to say, hey, there are resources, there are communities available for me, you know, at home, but also here, you know, I can continue the work that I'm doing, knowing that I'm being supported no matter where I am. And that, I mean, to me, the win was just purely like seeing this eagerness, and they're like, hey, how do I join the community? What's the Discord link? Like, what are you doing? Because it like seeing people get it and just be so excited.
Yeah, it's like you're handing them some kind of golden ticket. We're like, hey, you want to join?
Just don't volunteer for anything, because you'll be responsible for the entire continent if you do. That's how that works.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I thought that was really interesting that you said that you're exploring inside of this is not just the idea of like, hey, we want to expand the diversity of what's happening in the world of Python here, but we can help people prepare for jobs and roles and things like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so and maybe this is the other shout out or call out to the audience for support. Like, the job market right now is weird. I don't have a better word for it, because it's not that there aren't jobs. It's just, you know, recruiters, you know, even recruiters in the Python space are talking about a job rec opens, and then the next day you have 2,000 AI generated applications submitted. But then they're also using AI to try to filter out all of those applications. So like, who knows what's happening there? But you have these moments, and I always get so excited when I see someone that says like, hey, there's a new job and it's remote anywhere. And then I look and it goes remote anywhere in the US
Yeah.
or remote anywhere in US and Europe. And, again, a lot of folks are just like, I don't know if people understand how expensive it is to go through the H-1B visa process, or to like, if you're traveling on a student visa, you're not allowed to work.
Not allowed to look for work. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's so many barriers. So we're like, how do we start having these conversations to like show people that there are places outside of these key US areas, or this, the US, Canada, Europe, and say like, oh no, what is the true story about like the power and logistics problems in a country, or like how serious is that, or what does it look like to maybe hire consultants from those areas if we can't hire directly, and
Okay.
these are questions that I don't have the answer to.
Right. No. Yeah. There's a lot on the ground there. Yeah.
Yeah, and folks are asking me, so like now my goal is like, now that we're on the ground in some of those places, like how do we talk to local businesses? How do we talk to local industries that need developers and go, here's someone that lives down the street from you?
Hmm.
And that's even in the US. Like I tell, like,
Sure.
people ask me like, what's my advice to get hired in a tech job? And I tell them, stop looking at tech companies. My first usage of Python was to automate a marketing process that was supposed to take me, 6 months to a year to do.
Right.
And I got it done in a day thanks to the power of Python, and
Yeah. Take those Excel jobs and yeah,
exactly.
and use the multiplication power
Yeah.
of Python.
But I mean, hospitals are looking for developers, colleges are looking for developers, and, there are government jobs that are looking for developers that have really great benefits, and all of these things. And
Yeah.
if you only look at 10 companies and none of them are hiring and they're all in a hiring freeze, but then like you can go over to like a logistics company, one, you're going to solve some really interesting problems.
Yeah.
But how do we work as an organization to show those companies how to effectively hire for those roles? Because that's where you start falling into the like, you need a college degree and you need 15 years experience in fast API, which not possible. Like so many of those little things, and it's because they don't know. Like it's just purely that they don't know, and there's nothing wrong with them not knowing. But if there's a way to connect with those types of companies, not just overseas, definitely overseas, because I know that's where a big demand is.
Yeah.
But even in the US, of just like, how do I help Python developers find jobs where they can explore using Python in unique ways? And to me, honestly, it's those unique ways that are going to make you way more valuable in the tech space, because you're often having to explain like, how do I explain this Python thing to a person that thinks Python is just a snake?
Right. Yeah. Or it's just a scripting language or whatever,
Yeah.
these different things. Yeah. I think there's a lot of reading between the lines to see that stuff there. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a call to action you want to shout out there as far as Black Python devs?
Yeah, so I always tell people, if you feel like Black Python Devs is a place where you can see people like yourselves, consider joining. You can go to blackpythondevs.com. If you are interested in helping, support Black Python devs, I tell people there's some free ways and there's some ways that cost money. The ones that cost money are just simply sponsoring. You can set up a one-time or recurring donation of any amount that you want. We also do corporate matching. There's a lot of different things. If you have any questions on how to do any of that stuff, you can just email me. I'm at leadership@blackpythondevs.com. It doesn't go to just me. It goes to a team of really smart folks that can.
That's nice. That's a change in your message.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, if you're like, you know what, I'm not really in a financial position to where I can help. We're always looking for people to say like, hey, I have a couple of hours. I'll review someone's code, or I have some experience hosting a meetup. I'm happy to talk to someone. Or, one of the fun things that we're really doing, and it just came out as we're recording this, we're going to be sponsoring PyOhio for the next few years.
Nice.
And a part of that sponsorship is, there's a monetary side to that, but there's also like how do we connect the PyOhio team with local Black leaders in tech in the Ohio area?
Yeah.
And how do we get them involved to just learn, like, hey, here's what this community needs. Here's what this community is looking for. And we've done some similar things with the PSF and the DSF with like getting them lists of HBCUs or historically Black colleges and universities in the area. But yeah, if you've got an organization and you're like, how do we make what we're doing more approachable, more equitable, more accessible, safer for, Black Python developers? Yeah, you can reach out to us. Again, leadership@blackpythondevs.com. Just let us know what you're doing and what you'd like to see us do. And again, I just said that we probably should say no more, but one of the things that we'll do is if we can identify some leaders in your area, we'll say, hey, let's get you in touch with them and have you have you working one-on-one with them.
That's great. Well, I have these weekly questions I like to ask everybody.
I love it.
So what's something that you're excited about in the world of Python right now?
The PyPI stuff is really interesting. Like, it's
okay.
Little known fact, I have like 20 or so Python packages that are all like wrapped around the static site generator that I built for myself as a way to learn Python. But I also have some other packages that I've just used as a developer advocate in the Python space that I'm like, I need a little thing that lets me do this. And I got a slew of emails that were like, hey, two-factor auth is a thing and you need to do it. And here's like the proper way to set up publishing, to PyPI through GitHub now using like their credentialed system. And I'm really excited for that because I think that, there's still so many questions on packaging in the Python space. But getting an idea and getting it on PyPI is becoming a very solid idea. And it's becoming one that is easy to teach. And I think that, someone once told me that GitHub repos are free. So why not just make stuff? When in doubt, just make stuff. And I really think that, as long as you're doing it responsibly, like PyPI is the same way. Anybody can put a package on PyPI. And the first time I packaged something was purely because my work didn't allow GitHub, but they allowed PyPI. So like, I was like, well, I've got to package this at home and then import it,
share it,
import it as a way to like actively use this code. So yeah, I'm really excited at the work that I mentioned. My former colleague Seth Larson, the work that he's been doing on the security side, some of the SBOM stuff that's been coming out of that. But at the end of the day, like anything that's going to shore up kind of what we're doing as a community, what we're doing as a language, I think is super fascinating. And it's a different side of Python that I think a lot of people don't really think about all that much.
Yeah, every time I see one of these person hired, it's like this little mini celebration, across the board. And it's nice. I was worried with I don't want to call it a downturn, but the pivot of the industry and this whole change of stuff that things were going to maybe happen as far as the amount of contributions that were happening to Python and the Python Software Foundation. But it seems like the tap's still on, which is great.
I think some of those big companies just realize how much Python is being used. I mean, in their own company.
I mean, for the AI thing, it's definitely there, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think Python's in a really good spot to. I know NVIDIA just made a multi-year commitment as well. NVIDIA being one of the richest companies on the planet.
I think they got some money. Yeah.
Microsoft hires. Microsoft employs folks whose
day in, day out.
It's baked into their contract of like, you have this much time a week to just focus on Python development, which is really cool.
Yeah.
People like the Faster C Python team, which is super awesome, who I loved advocating for while I was at Microsoft. I've told that team before, like, if you need a DA, you need a developer advocate just for what y'all are doing, give me a call. We'll figure it out.
This is a question I've been thinking about adding. How do you stay motivated to keep learning Python? What are things that keep you motivated in that realm?
I think the thing for me is that I kind of stopped looking at how can I learn more Python, and it was like, how can I do more things with Python?
Okay.
And
more projects and creations and things. Okay.
Yeah, this move to Aiven as a company, again, like I'm working with databases that I've never used before, and some of them don't have SDKs. Some of them don't have a Python module, and luckily most of them do, or they do, and they're like a third party thing. And anytime I see that, it's like an opportunity to contribute, and just being able to jump in and go like, hey, like let's figure out how we can better document this Python thing, or let's write some tests for it. Or I've noticed I've been calling myself now more of a like developer experience type thing of like,
sure,
how do we get things like dev containers or code spaces in? How do we update contributing docs to make it easier for anybody to come in and just submit like a, drive-by PRs are, if done responsibly, are very always welcome. But like,
right.
You notice a little typo, you shouldn't have to like download the entire SDK to fix the typo and then like
and submit it.
Do 5 layers of packaging onto it, and it's so how do we just make those things? And a lot of it for me is like, as soon as someone tells me you do something and it doesn't involve Python, I'm like, well, how do I do this in Python? and then it evolves into like learning about things like abstract base classes and these things that I've never had a use for.
Right.
But now I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, oh, I can do this, or like I can play around with typing, or I can use this module, and it's going to make it more approachable to people who aren't Python developers, or it's going to make it a little bit easier for developer advocates. I'm a big fan of something like a Streamlit, where I'm not a front end developer at all, but I know that with Streamlit I can just write Python code and get a really pretty demo. And just teaching developer advocates about that kind of stuff, that's the thing that makes me want to learn more, is like, how do you write rock paper scissors in 6 lines of code?
Right.
Should you write rock paper scissors in 6 lines of code?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So what's something that you want to learn next? This doesn't have to be about programming. It could be,
oh man, I kind of mentioned the like understanding how grants work thing. That's probably the business.
I hope somebody hears this and is got some information for you. So
I would love for someone to email me and be like, I'm a grant writer that uses Python. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
I've gotten into plants lately. It's kind of weird. Like,
I got
hit
some.
That I'm
nice.
post pandemic here. I'm showing off some of my plants that I got. I actually got them earlier this year.
This is my little one. It's a little
nice.
one that's growing off, and I'm trying to grow its. This is my wife suggested the ones when they do the reach out kind of thing, and you're like trying to land, and he's like, okay, put it in a thing of water, wait for it's got some roots. So.
But yeah, I mean, you mentioned it before. Like, I'm so interested in so many little things. Like, I love doing short form video, but I kind of love the editing process, because we're in a space where, like, dating myself, prior to YouTube, so
yeah.
We learned how to do the YouTube thing, and then we learned how to do the social media thing. Then we learned how to, like, there's going to be a generation of people that are just like, the TikTok or the short Instagram reels or the short form video is.
Yeah, those tools are kind of wild. Yeah.
But how do you teach people Python with that? How do you reach a community of folks with short form video? And it's a mystery. It's a challenge. And that's something that I keep threatening. I threatened Marietta. I was like, if you put me on stage and I get to do the gritty, like, or some TikTok dance on stage, like, I'm going to own it. But
that's funny.
But yeah, just learning about new, like, not even new technology, but new ways of reaching the next generation of Python developers.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's if I tell people you got to do it and you got to do it this way, then I'm just perpetuating the same problem that I'm trying to fight against.
Yeah. There's a lot of that, that's one of my issues. We didn't get into it, but I had a problem with academia.
You too, huh?
Yeah, it just didn't work out.
That's what I tell people. I was like, college was great for the whole 6 weeks that I was there.
Yeah, I made it a year and a half, and then I was just like, this isn't working out for me. And I was infatuated with doing music at the time, so so it's all worked out. So how can people follow the work that you do online? I would guess there'd be a few ways here.
Yeah, there's so much. So I will throw my personal site out first.
Okay.
That's kjmiller.com. It's kjaymiller.com. It is very archaic, but also I do my best to share what I'm doing on there.
Okay.
I have a microblog there that also feeds out to Mastodon and kind of that whole thing. But if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I'm Jay Miller, and I try to keep everything consistent. So if you see one photo, just look for that photo everywhere,
Yeah.
including my website. Like take the photo that's on my website and go, now let me find that photo on the internet. Jay Miller is pretty common. So, but yeah, I'm on all things that I'm on at KJ Miller. I'm always making a new GitHub repo. So if you follow me on GitHub, you'll kind of see what I'm interested in based on like the repo that has nothing in it. That's just like, how do you do this, and this with Python? So yeah,
you can see you working in live code there. Yeah, would you say render engines like kind of your big project then?
When I have time for it, which I will say, there's a lot of render engine is one of those things that I probably should talk more about, but at the same time, like it really is just a project for me to learn Python and package maintenance, and it runs my website. It runs almost all the other websites that for things that I'm a part of. And I've actually had, I'm getting into the realm now where I have a few people who are maintainers and contributors. So
I see that. Yeah. Got a few contributors.
That's like nice. The coolest thing ever, of just being like, let me first and foremost apologize for this horrible code that I wrote, but then also like learning and letting people share ideas and going like, how would you implement this? And then just kind of growing as a developer through there. That's
cool. Well, Jay, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
So happy we could finally make this happen. Maybe we'll go 3 other PyCons before I can make it back.
I don't think we should do that.
Okay, I like it.
We should make it a little sooner than that. And don't forget, for your time series needs, use InfluxDB. It's trusted by leading companies for its scalability, real-time performance, and easy integration with modern data stacks. Start for free at InfluxData.com. I want to thank Jay Miller for coming on the show this week. And I want to thank you for listening to the Real Python Podcast. Make sure that you click that follow button in your podcast player. And if you see a subscribe button somewhere, remember that the Real Python Podcast is free. If you like the show, please leave us a review. You can find show notes with links to all the topics we spoke about inside your podcast player or at realpython.com/podcast. And while you're there, you can leave us a question or a topic idea. I've been your host, Christopher Bailey, and I look forward to talking to you soon.